What's going on, everyone? It's your man, Big Rob, again with some pro wrestling takes. Today, I kind of wanted to talk about TKO, Endeavor, the state of the WWE, um, and the backlash that this company is getting. I think it's become very apparent in the last calendar year, the last 365 days since WrestleMania 41, that TKO really has no business owning a wrestling company, managing a wrestling company, booking a wrestling company. I mean, you watch this show and they don't even know who their fan base is. They don't know if they want to be a sports league. They don't know if they want to be a entertainment entity. Um, they have no clue, and it's really making the product suffer. Um, the WWE over the last 35 years has built up a great fan base. They have a lot of goodwill with the fans. I think we can all agree that the last 15 years of Vince McMahon booking the show, it was dreadful. It was awful. But I think the one thing that made it okay, not that it was okay, but maybe that's not the right choice of words. We felt okay because at the end of the day, with Vince McMahon, we knew that we had a guy at the helm of the company who was all things pro wrestling. He lived it, breathed it, slept it, and everything he did was for the betterment of pro wrestling, even though it was terrible and the guy couldn't book for the last 15 years because he was so out of touch with reality. Regardless of all of Vince McMahon's faults, and there were many, listen to the people that worked for him, uh, the one thing that we can all agree on is that he understood the importance of the WWE universe. If you don't have them, you don't have anything. You don't have the business, you don't have the company. They have been a loyal fan base, from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, present day WWE. And that's the one thing that TKO is failing to realize. And without us, the company is not good. They make the shows, and I'm under the impression that Triple H has the same mindset. But I think the fans are freaking out, and I think that the fans are upset because they feel like TKO doesn't feel the same way. They look at the bottom line. They don't know how pro wrestling works. Let me ask you a question. You have Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes in the main event of night one of WrestleMania. Do you think Ari Emanuel and whoever else, any one of his cronies, know anything about that story? Do they know anything about Legacy? Do they know anything about Ted DiBiase? Do they know anything about the guys that were in that faction before it took off? I would guarantee you no. But this is where they're shortchanging the fans. The fans know this. The fans are invested. This is not the UFC. I said it the other day. We keep cosplaying as a real sports league, but that's not it. In the UFC, you have UFC pay-per-view. Generic fighter 1 versus generic fighter 2. Generic fighter 1 versus generic fighter 2. No backstory. That's not the WWE. And that's where Ari Emanuel and TKO and Endeavor are getting it twisted. This is all about storytelling, and the fans know this. But you're not concerned about the fans. The fans know what's going on. They know the history of the WWE. They can tell you who the first Intercontinental Champion was. They can tell you what the main event of WrestleMania 4, 5, 6, and 7 were. Can you? I don't think so. And that's why the fans are so upset now, because for the first time in the history of the WWE, you have people, non-wrestling people, running this company, and they're acting like it. Trust me. They're acting like it. They think they need, Travis Scott in the main event. They think they need Pat McAfee as a part of Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes. No, you listen to Cody Rhodes' promo on Friday night, and he says this is nothing more than two guys with 20 years history in a wrestling match. That's it. That's not good enough for TKO though, because they think this is the UFC where it's generic fighter 1 versus generic fighter 2. This isn't sports. This is entertainment, and they're not even doing that good. Vince McMahon understood that this thing only works if you have the WWE universe. TKO doesn't understand that, and that's the problem. You're pricing out the fans. They can't go to the events. The reactions are lackluster. That's a direct result of pricing out the true fans. You have these events, and they're becoming, a celebrity fest where people aren't invested in the stories. They don't know the history. So the crowds are dead. You get no reaction for the stars because the fans aren't invested. And now TKO and Ari Emanuel think these fans or the wrestlers aren't over. No, you just don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. It's the first time in history where the fan base, the real fan base, not the internet wrestling community, there's a lot of clowns, on the internet. People that know pro wrestling, know this business, know the ins and outs, know that a generic, simple story can work, know more than the owners of this company. That wasn't always the case. You go back through history, Don Owens, Vern Gagne, Vince McMahon Sr., Paul Bosch, Vince McMahon. They were wrestling, so the fans were kind of like, all right, well, I don't know as much as them. Now the fans know more than the owner of WWE, and that's a fact. That's why so many people on the internet here take off, because they have real pro wrestling knowledge, more than Aaron Manuel, more than Mark Shapiro, more than TKO. And we're upset because this isn't pro wrestling. I use the phrase cosplaying as a sports league. They're cosplaying as a wrestling company because they don't know how to write a story. They don't understand that's what it's about. So, it's just tough. TKO is going to continue to have this problem if they don't make some real changes. Having CM Punk go on TV last night and saying lower the ticket prices so I can bring all these people with me to WrestleMania. That's that's unbelievable and unheard of. That would have never happened in Vince McMahon's era. But it's the truth. And he's sitting there, and I keep thinking, he's saying, what would Harley Race do? Harley Race wouldn't let some suit and tie that doesn't know pro wrestling tell him how to do pro wrestling. And that's a fact, and that's why we got that shoot interview last night. So I said it the other day. TKO needs to fund the product, and that's it. Let the wrestlers cook. Invite the WWE universe, who's feeling very down and feeling like they're not cared about, who have supported this product, bring them back in. Allow them to attend these events. I've been to multiple WrestleManias, Raw, SmackDowns. I can't afford to go anymore. And that's ridiculous, man. I would have loved to gone. But, let me know your thoughts. TKO has a real problem on their hands, and they have a lot to do to bring the fan base back here. They owe us, man. They truly owe us. And that starts now. So let me know your thoughts. Big Rob out.